Okay. Well, the first thing I should say is that I'm not Pastor Ed. I'm just someone from the congregation. And oops, I got to click my thing there. Right there we go. So Pastor Ed is off in, I think, Arizona this weekend. So we have other people filling in like me. Okay, so my topic for this morning is reading and studying the Bible. And you know, in the Christian life, in fact, from the non-Christian life too, there's always room for improvement. And when we're not doing things God's way, when things our own way, the Bible has a word for that. That word is sin. And the Apostle John says in 1 John 1:18, if we say we have no sin, we are deceiving ourselves, and the truth is not in us. So that's everybody, and he was writing to believers back in the first century there. Now, a long time ago, here in Santa Cruz, back when I was a student at the university, on New Year's Eve, we would go to University Baptist Church, and the church there on New Year's Eve always had a service, a Holy Communion service at midnight. And Pastor Marvin Webster there, each year he'd say, I think it's all the same thing. As we come to the end of the year, he was saying, it's a good time to look back on the year. And now we're this is the third or fourth week in January. So we're still in the beginning of a new year. So it's a good question to ask still. And the question he would ask was to look and think about our where we were spiritually now, the New Year's Eve compared with New Year's Eve a year before, and what growth and progress had there been during that year there. And so that's a good question to ask yourself at other times. You can ask yourself on your birthday or on your wedding anniversary or some anniversary, something. What progress have you made there? And I could list a whole bunch of shortcomings, but two in particular that often convicted by is not praying enough and not read the Bible enough. And this morning I'm just going to talk about the second of those two things. Now, a sort of theme verse for what I'm going to say is from 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17. And that says, all scripture is inspired by God and is profitable for correction, for reproof, and training in righteousness, that the man of God might be equipped for every good work, or every good deed. So if I'm going to be, let me just remember this list of things, if we get more straight here. So if I'm going to be corrected, and by the way, that verse doesn't say for correcting other people, right? It's not for reproving other people. It's for reproving me, correcting me. So if I'm going to be corrected, I'm going to be reproved, I don't do something right. If I'm going to be trained in righteousness, one wants to be righteous, and wants to do good works, but you have to be equipped for doing them. So how is that? Well, it's through Scripture there. Now, many of you, maybe not all of you, have a copy of the church book Faith on the Mountain here. And somewhere in the middle of the book, about page 200 or something or other, is the find it in a minute, is the story of my conversion. Oh, that's a copy being held up over there. That's good. Yeah, in the middle there. So if you want to, you can read along. So in there is the story of how I became a Christian, and one of the things that I say in there was, okay, not much spiritual growth took place during my high school and years and first few years of college, and when I was in college, I noticed that there were some Christians who were clearly better Christians than I was, and I noticed three characteristics of them. One was that they were very keen on the Bible. Number two was that they prayed a lot. And number three was that they saw remarkable answers to a prayer. When I thought about it logically, I thought, well, okay, close to 100% of what we know about Jesus is from the Bible. So if you're going to be serious about following Jesus, then you have to be serious about the Bible. So that made sense there. Well. One Saturday morning, I was in my dorm room, and there's a knock on my door at about 11 o'clock at lunchtime, or something around there, and there were some fellow students outside, not ones I knew. Actually, I didn't know one of them, who said, we're a bunch of Christians. They were from this is in Britain, so this is the British equivalent of InterVarsity. It has a different name over there, but it's the InterVarsity here, that Laura has been involved in and so on, and Eleanor Theo. And they said, we're inviting people to a Bible study. And it was very simple. I thought, I'm a Christian. I should go to Bible study. And so right there and then, I said sure. And actually, it turned out that one of the people was one of the smartest, maybe the smartest students in my class in advanced physics. So I actually knew him, and I'm still in touch slightly. So that was a really important transfer thing. That didn't happen until halfway through my senior year that I got into with the Bible study, and off and on I've been part of Bible study ever since then. So this is something of an aside I'm going to say, but I highly recommend being part of a Bible study. And again, if you've read the church book here, or many people's stories in here. You'll know that for many people's lives, the women's Bible study in Bonnie Doon has been very influential. That's still going on. If you want to join that, talk to Carol. She's not here this morning, but about that. So doing things together is always a good idea. As you know, I'm in education, and in education, research shows that students who study together do better on exams and tests and things. So there's a little tip there. Now, another little personal story here was I came to graduate school in astrophysics here at UCSC, and being a graduate student is tough. You got lots of tough courses and things to do, and so on. And there was a textbook which was pretty important in my field. And in fact, I've now got 4 copies of this textbook. It's gone through 3 editions. I've got all 3 editions. I've got 4 copies of it. So I can read them like this, I guess. And somehow, halfway through grad school, I was convicted that I actually knew this graduate textbook better than I knew the Bible. And so, this is studying God's creation is great. That's a very worthwhile thing to do. But from the Bible, we can learn something about the Creator. And so I realized that I really needed to set about fixing that. Now, about that time, I got a copy of a book by R.C. Sproul called Knowing Scripture. And it had an introduction by a famous theologian called J.I. Packer, who wrote a best-selling book called Knowing God. And I remember the preface to that he wrote to that book, introduction. He said, it began, "If I were the devil," he said, "if I were the devil, I would surround the Bible with barbed wire and booby traps and man traps and all kinds of things to stop people reading it." So I'll talk about talk about and refute some of the ways that Satan does that, some of these ways that they might not apply to you, but you might well know somebody to whom they do apply, and so these are good things to share with other people. So Satan is, when he's the father of lies, but he's often very subtle. He's the deceiver, also accuser, and so it's often fairly subtle. We don't always get frontal attacks on ourselves, and this is true in many other things in life too. That back in the Second World War or something, there was a lot of deceit and subtle stuff was going on, and the Allies didn't want the Germans to know exactly where they're going to land on D-Day, things like that. So Satan is doing things subtly, trying to lower our morale, get wrong ideas into our heads, and so on. So going back to my days as a student, I had good intentions. Oh yes, the Bible. Obviously, I needed to read the Bible. A day would come, a day would go, and I had not read the Bible. The next day would come and go. I didn't read the Bible that day either. And then the next day, and before I knew it, a whole bunch of days had gone by there. So I was not, as Paul says in 2 Timothy, I was not getting getting corrected, reproved. I was not being trained in righteousness. I was getting well trained in astrophysics from a different book, and I was not being equipped for every good work there. So if you look at that passage there, what Paul wrote to Timothy began, all Scripture is inspired by God. Well, I'm going to stop right there on the first word, and the first word says all, totus, everything, so a first step for me was to make sure that I as a starting point, that I had read the whole of the Bible there, and to make sure of that, I sort of went systematically through the Bible, and I've kept doing that ever since, in different versions, different translations, and so on. But just systematically going through, including some of the bits which are probably not your favorites or mine, but just reading through the whole Bible there. Now, Barbara, as I guess you can read the book here. I'm also going to plug the book here. You can read the story in here of how Barbara became a Christian, and she heard something down at University Baptist Church right around that time. I don't know, it was in a sermon or a Sunday school or just casual thing somebody said. So I said, "Oh, who?"
It was probably New Year's Eve.
It might have been. My boss over here. It might have even been on New Year's Eve. Something about the fraction of new Christians who in their first year as a Christian do or don't read through the entire Bible. So Barbara is an organized person. She decided, okay, she's going to do that. So as a first year as a Christian, she can make sure she's read all the way through the Bible there. I was once in a Christian faculty and staff group a long time ago now, and there was a woman there who was thinking that she really needed to go off to seminary, and there's a place for seminary, but I somehow felt this wasn't the place for her at that time, and she wanted to know more about the Bible, know more about Jesus, great aims. But then I said, oh, but have you read the entire Bible? She goes, oh. No, and they sort of realized, okay, before we think about going off to seminary or anything, let's go and read the entire Bible. So I'm not sure if she ever went off to seminary or not. I suspect not. So let's talk about some of Satan's lies. So he's the father of lies. He does lie directly, and so one lie is that the Bible is a too big, too long book to read. It's too formidable. There used to be a book many of us had called the CRC Handbook. It was all full of chemistry and physics, and so it's a good reference book. It was huge, probably about as big as the Bible, or even bigger, and it was pretty intimidating. Now because of Omicron variant, and nobody's been in the church right now, but if we were up the front of the church, there's this real nice big old Bible, but it's huge. It's a King James version, Old King James English, and it looks pretty intimidating there. Well, if you know me, you know I like numbers. I like statistics, like equations and graphs and so on. So here are some numbers for us. In the New Testament, there are 260 chapters. In the Old Testament, there are 926 chapters. If you refer to the chapters are different lengths, like Psalm 117 counts as an entire chapter, but it's really short. So 119 is very long, so it might be easiest to work in terms of number of pages. So I checked through the different Bibles that we had. I checked some Bibles in English and French and Spanish, and they all came out to be somewhere between 1,200 and 1,700 pages. Now, there are 365 days in a year. So if you call that just round numbers between 300 and 400 something, that means that to read through the Bible in a year, which is a good place to start off, then you need to read 3 chapters of the Old Testament each day, one of the New. That works out about right in round figures. Or alternatively, that's about 3 pages of the Old, one of the New, or 4 pages total. Now, I think Satan's going to say, "Oh, you haven't got time to do that. You've got other important things you have to do, your work you have to do, and the kids to take care of, or all sorts of other things there." So back to numbers and calculations here. I looked up the number of words in the Bible, and the answer, depending on the translation, is pretty close. The language too is pretty close to 800,000 words. So if you divide that up by 365, and you then go and look up an average talking rate. I'm probably talking right now at about 150 words per minute. I'm kind of erratic. I speed up, slow down. But I'd actually time myself reading a chapter in the Bible. So how long does this take? How fast do I read? And if you're reading aloud at an average speed, average talking speed, about 150 words per minute, then you can read those 4 chapters in a quarter of an hour. Think about it, in a church service, sometimes Pastor Ed will read an entire chapter. That takes a few minutes. If you've read 4 chapters, that would take about a quarter of an hour. Now, if you're sitting down enjoying reading a novel, you're not speaking, reading quietly, you read much faster. And the average person reads about 300 words per minute. In that case, you can read 4 chapters, zip through them in about 7 minutes or so. So the point is that and I'm not actually recommending you read a Bible at high speed. In fact, quite the opposite, really. But the point is, it's not an overwhelming amount of time. And when Satan tries to say to me, "Oh, you haven't got time," and so on and so on and so on, so it's often good to think about other things in the day that you might spend 7 minutes or 15 minutes doing, reading the newspaper or other things there, or watching cat videos on the internet. That was great fun. The average cat video is probably only 1 minute. And of course, if you just come to church online, you can see cats out there. I don't know how many cats we got here this morning. I've got at least 2 out there probably. So, okay, but Now you can. So let's talk about practicalities of reading the Bible. There are for particularly the New Testament, just kind of starting from the beginning, going through in order, is not necessarily the right way to do things. Or the best way of doing this, a way. There's one of the cats coming in. I can see the cat in the video there. Yes, that's nice. We get to watch cat videos in church here. There are various lists you can find online and books and so on for orders for reading through the Bible. I can tell you my own sort of way of doing it, what I recommend. The reason that going straight through is not necessarily the best way is the books are not necessarily ordered in a chronological manner. They're not meant to be read in that order. Books are meant to be read as a whole. That's always worth remembering. So the Gospels, St. Luke, Ed is now studying St. Luke's Gospel with us. Luke intended that Theophilus, this person he wrote to about it, intended that Theophilus was going to read the whole thing in an orderly manner. He says so right there in the introduction there. And he says the same thing beginning of Acts of the Apostles as well. But the books of the Bible are grouped in ways. In the Old Testament, first of all, we get the law and the history. Then we get the writings in Hebrew, or wisdom literature, the poetry. We've got Psalms and Proverbs in there, and then we get the prophets. We get the major prophets and the minor prophets there, and some of the books are just grouped by author or by size. The letters of St. Paul. So actually, in the New Testament, we have 4 Gospels first. And I thought it'd be fun for us this morning to have Ian lead us in singing that song about the books of the Bible. It helps you learn what the books of the Bible are and helps you find things inside them. And by the way, let me tell you something about going to China now. Min's here, and the story of how God linked me up with Min is a wonderful story, but I won't tell you now. If you want to hear it, stay around after church, and Min or I can tell you. But Min took me to a church in Xi'an in China, and I apart from saying hello, I can't speak Chinese, and that's ni hao, by the way, and so in church then there's hymns, Bible reading, sermons, all that kind of stuff, and so I'm wondering what's going on here. Well, I discovered a very useful thing to know about the Bible. You have a Chinese Bible that you can't read. And I wanted to show Min what was being read in the Bible there. Is to know the order of the books of the Bible. I just don't know where they are. And another useful thing I discovered was to know how long each book was. So that when the preacher is referring to a chapter 16 or something, you'll know that Second Thessalonians doesn't have 16 chapters in it, and things like that. So anyhow, so having some idea of the structure of the Bible is a good idea, and that song there is one of the ways of learning it. Anyhow, so we've got 4 Gospels in a row there, and 3 of the Gospels are actually fairly similar. We're called the Synoptic Gospels, and then John's Gospel, which was written later, and we're probably well aware of the other ones. He probably intentionally describes a few things that are not in the first Gospel there. But then we have Acts of the Apostles, which we studied last year in Ed's sermons, and then the Epistles of St. Paul. So they're put together. They're actually in order of a decreasing size. There's Romans is longest, and First, Second Corinthians, and so on. And for remembering the order of those, I'll tell you a silly thing that we learned decades ago from a pastor. He said that the way to know the order of St. Paul's epistle is to think of the vowels A, E, I, O, U. So we get so straight here. So A is for, you're going to help me out here. So see, we've got Romans, Corinthians, no, next. What's that? It was E there. I'm going to feel bad. Ephesians, thank you. It's for the short epistle. Okay, so it's Galatians. That's sorry. It starts in Galatians. So you've got to remember you got Romans and First Corinthians. Then this is in the song. Then you've got Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, AEI, Colossians, and then he said, and First and Second Thessalonians. So that's how you always remember the order of the shorter epistles. I probably need something like that for learning the order of the minor prophets as well. Okay, so they're grouped together. But what I recommend people for reading the New Testament, and I also recommend, by the way, starting with New Testament, is to read one of the Gospels. And then as you get the words of Jesus, the life of Jesus there, then Acts of the Apostles, which kind of lays the foundation for what the apostles did, and then start reading the letters of the apostles. We get St. Paul first. We get the letter to the Hebrews. We get James, then Peter, John, and Jude. There again, St. Paul's ones. There's the churches first. Then we get the individuals again. They get shorter as you go through them there. So we've got the. So then I suggest is a sort of what I call a gospel sandwich of coming back to the gospel, four gospels. So let's read a gospel, read Acts, read some of the epistles, then go back to the gospel. So you just keep coming back to things. I think my thing about reading the Bible is as Ian was saying at the beginning, one doesn't want to get complacent. Oh, I know that, because we don't know that. Because I certainly, for one, forget things, and I'm continually surprised, sometimes alarmed by things I read in the Bible. I'd forgotten that was there, or something like that. Now, so Satan's lie number 2 is that the Bible is a hard book to read. Well, if you read the King James Version in Shakespearean English, and if English is not your first language in particular, yes, that's hard going. But there are much easy to read translations. Then another thing Satan would say, oh, you can't trust modern translations, and that's definitely worth exploring, because it is true that the Bible was written in ancient languages. It's written, the Old Testament is in Hebrew, not quite modern Hebrew. The New Testament is written Old Greek, and it's not as I discovered when I went to Greece, it's not the same Greek that they speak in Greece nowadays. But those of us who read English, we are so blessed with translations. I looked this up, and according to Wikipedia, there are about 100 translations of the entire Bible into English. 100 going back over many centuries. And there's a website called Bible Gateway, and Bible Gateway has 83 of those online right there. And if you want to, you can compare all the translations there. I think the next best language was French. Over the years, there have been 60 translations of the Bible into French, of which Bible Gateway, being rather English biased, has only 4. German seems to have not quite as many. It seems like there are 18 translations into German. There are 4 online there. Spanish is quite a lot. Spanish is 50. There are 19 there online. So there are a lot of different translations. You don't need to, the average person does not need to study Hebrew, study Greek. Now, Pastor Ed is really good at Hebrew. You might have heard that when he was a student in seminary, he was the TA for the Hebrew class. He's really good at it. John Burke, former pastor of the church here, regularly reads the Bible, the New Testament in Greek there. But for the ordinary person, the translators have done a good job. Now, if you're familiar with other languages, which applies to quite a number of us here, I mean, we've got we got Frauke in Germany right now. We got BB, Pascal, people in French. Then you have an understanding of what is involved with translation, and there's a spectrum of translations, and it goes from being very literal to being very loose. So literal is the order of the words, which might not necessarily really tell you what it's saying, but this is what the individual words are, and then you can go to a sort of paraphrase. Well, this is the point of what the guy is trying to say there. And my suggestion is to have and refer to one very literal translation of the Bible. We use the New American Standard Bible. It, like many Greek sentences, begin with the word but or and. This is not what we do in English. But it's there in the Greek. So the New American Standard has as many sentences begin with but and, which we don't do in English. And then having a freer paraphrase, which gets you thinking about what's behind it there. And I'm sure this is why Pastor Ed brings up his own EBB, that's the Ed Breeden translator, just to make us think about what's going on there. And then on this accurate translation business, most Bibles in their margins have little notes on the translation saying, well, we're translating like this, but the word is actually this. And so you get a sense of the issues involved in the translation there. Then if you want to get carried away, there are books like we have one called Vine's Expository Dictionary of Biblical Words. You can read a whole little article about keywords and what they mean and so on there. Okay, so getting on to practicalities of sort of reading and studying the Bible. My college textbooks in the back, they all had indexes. So you go and look things up. The average Bible it does not have an index in the back. I think it was rather, when it's being written, they weren't thinking about indices. And if you want to find something in the Bible, a good thing to have is a concordance. Now, if I was giving this talk 30 years ago, I'd be saying everybody should get a concordance. Nowadays, we're in the days of the internet, and I learned, I think, from Timothy in particular, that our son Timothy, that a very efficient way of looking up things is on the internet. And people do this or not, that Google's rather good at it. You start typing in a Bible verse into Google, it will auto-complete it for you and tell you where it is, and you can find it there. So that's really good. Okay, line number 4, Satan, the last one I want to talk about, is the Bible is not a reliable book. Satan will say this, and this is something that I researched a lot, particularly back when I was a student. I could talk about this a lot. It'd be a lot more than just a few minutes there. But let me just say a few little key points. If somebody brings up this question, asking, "Oh, the Bible, it was written thousands of hundred years later, not by eyewitnesses, and so on." It's good to have a few basic things there. Now, Jesus was crucified probably in AD 33, and that is set by astronomical considerations, because the Jewish calendar is a lunar solar calendar. So you want Passover, we set by the moon, to be on the right day of the week. So by far the most likely the date astronomically is AD 33. AD 30 is a little less likely, but not totally excluded. And another astronomical thing, by the way, in favor of AD 33 is it talks about the moon turning to blood. And the moon turning to blood is the classic description of a lunar eclipse. And there was a lunar eclipse that day. So there's another thing in favor of AD 33. Now, the eclipse was not really visible there in Israel at the time, but that kind of didn't matter, because they could predict these things. And of course, it might have been cloudy anyhow that day. And in fact, it was rather cloudy that day, so you know. So now, AD 33 is a date there. Now, the first book we can date in the New Testament. Now, the earliest one we can date. Now, this is not the first book written in the New Testament. This is just the first one we can date and say this was when it was written. Now, that turns out to be First Thessalonians, and the First Thessalonians mentions a proconsul called Gallo. And we know from an inscription on a building or something somewhere, we know that he was only proconsul for a rather short time there, and that was from AD 51 to 52 AD. So it's thought that First Thessalonians was written in AD 51. Now let's do a bit of arithmetic here. I'll read up some arithmetic. AD 51, 52, that is only 18 or 19 years afterwards. Now, think about 18 or 19 years. I think we're all old enough that we can remember back 18 or 19 years. Those people we knew and interacted with 18, 19 years, they're still around, and we've still got pretty vivid memories there. And by the way, it's possible that the epistle to Galatians was written AD 48, so that's even earlier. Okay, now in the regular sermon series, we're studying Acts. We're studying Acts now, and then we're studying Luke. Luke wrote both, how does Acts end up? Well, it ends up with Paul in Rome at his own expense. Now, we know from other history that Paul got killed, and actually, the Apostles doesn't mention anything about that. You'd think that if it's written a long time later, it would say, "Oh, and then he had his head chopped off." But no, it just says, "Oh, he's living there in his house there," and so on. So the obvious conclusion there was actually the Apostles was written before St. Paul was killed, and so that puts it back to about 63 AD. And then doing our math here, that's only 30 years after the crucifixion. Now, Luke wrote Acts after he'd written his gospel. Luke says in his gospel he's not the first guy to write a gospel. That's probably why we have it third in the Bible. So you've got Matthew and Mark and other sources of Luke was written well before that in the gospel. So we're pushing things back into the 50s, and only about 20 years at the most. This is at the most after things happen. Now, Barbara says that she'd been one of the disciples. She'd have been there with a notepad writing down everything Jesus said as he said it, and I think that's quite reasonable. We know, for example, that Matthew was a tax collector. He knew about writing and keeping records and things. Now, another big event in history is that Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 AD. There's no reference in the Bible to Jerusalem being destroyed as having happened, especially the book of Hebrews. The book of Hebrews talks about things going on in the temple and so on. They were still going on when the writer of Hebrews wrote that. So we're talking about rather short time periods here. Now, put some things here, but Bob and I have been married for 41 years now. We can remember what happened on our wedding day when we were courting and things like that. I'm part of a Facebook group from my high school. People talk about things that happened in high school, and I notice that there are no contradictions in what people say. Now, people sometimes say, "Oh, I don't remember that," or we remember different things, but there are no contradictions there. So the Bible's really very, very reliable there. I've got more things that I could say as well, and I'm not going to because of time. But I'll give one little teaser though. We have a joke in the choir. We have a lot of fun in the choir. And one of the jokes in the choir is, if we're not fully prepared for a piece on Sunday, we kind of say, what's the worst that could happen? And we joke about maybe a comet would land on an asteroid or something or other. And there's interesting thing that happens in the Bible, which now actually modern science is pointing to. Such an event happening. But anyhow, that's just a teaser. I won't tell you that. So anyhow, after a while, I thought God was saying to me, "Okay, look, you're convinced that the Bible is reliable. Now go and read it and apply it to your life here." So things to do here. If you hear something, somebody says something, go and check it out in the Bible. In Acts 17:11. But Luke says that the Christians the people in Berea were much better than the guys before them, and they had gone and they searched the Scripture to see whether things are really true. And to do that, and it helps to be familiar with the Bible, to know what's there, to be able to find things. And when somebody says that something's not in the Bible, you can say, hey, wait a bit, yes, it is. It's right here. So do that. A very useful things in the Bible are cross references in the margin, the little numbers, and they tell you other Bible verses that say the same thing. And the Bible is a great book for interpreting itself there. Now, some things in the Bible are very straightforward. For example, it says, do not be anxious, okay? Do not be anxious. It's a pretty tough one. I violated that one by myself. Really, really straightforward. By the way, Jesus says that in the Sermon on the Mount, that's Matthew 6, I think it is, there. Or there's some straightforward advice. A gentle answer turns away anger. So if somebody's angry at you, then think, okay, a gentle answer, we want to give a gentle answer because that's what turns away anger there. But there are a lot of things in the Bible are not like that. There's a lot of history and stuff and stories in the Bible. And the key verse about this is St. Paul says a number of times, it says in 1 Corinthians and Romans, he says, now, these things in the Bible, happened to us as an example, and they were written for our instruction. And then he says, whatever was in the Romans, says 15, says, whatever was written in earlier times was written for our instruction, so that through perseverance and encouragement of the scripture, we might have hope. So those are things to be looking for as you're reading through the Bible there. So be looking for examples, be looking for instruction, be looking for an encouragement there. And I think especially in some of the history of the Old Testament, you have to ask yourself, well, okay, what does it mean for me? The answer might be fairly simple, like don't do what those guys did, right? But be thinking about that. Think what's the underlying message? For example, in a lot of in the Pentateuch, a lot of the instructions is found very specific to the people of Israel. But okay, now what's God concerned about here? Now, God's concerned about people remembering His word. He's concerned about holiness. You see things like that, and. Going back to what Ian said beforehand about having to keep reading the Bible, I forget things. Maybe I'm the only person who does that, but I need to be reminded of things. And so reading the Bible, it's something that one needs to be doing to keep going through. So it's time to stop. So let me my computer's unplugged. So. Let me just sort of summarize some things here. Okay, so my bullet points here. First one is reading the Bible is not overwhelming. It's very practical. It's not hard to read unless you're trying to read a reading in a foreign language. And by the way, there's a lot to be said for reading the Bible in a different language, in an ancient translation. Translators have done a good job, and translation should not be a barrier. Then if you investigate these things, the Bible is a reliable book, and there's great tools for just the average person to study the Bible. There are margin notes, there are cross references, there are concordance, there are Bible dictionaries, books on words, and so on. For me, the Bible is a book which is continually correcting and reproving me, as Paul said to Timothy, for training me in righteousness and equipping me for good works, all things that I want and we want to be able to do there. And when you're reading the whole Bible in the Old Testament, it's good to just remind yourself what St. Paul said. It's written for our instruction there. So there might be some bad things happening in some passage in the Old Testament. That doesn't sound very good. But remember, those things are written there for our instruction. So those things to look for. And again, I forget things. I need to be reminded, and the thing to do is to be continually, systematically reading through Scripture. When I was going out to work, not during COVID, of course, I would try to make it sure every single day that I'd read at least some of the Bible before I headed out of the door. So think about how you can work it into your schedule there. Okay, that I think is more than enough from me for this morning. So thank you for listening.